Hello and welcome to Talent Talks. My name is David Allison. These webinars and podcasts provide an insight into the changing world of work. They're a conversation with those responsible for recruiting into companies large and small, as well as with apprentices and graduates to hear what the world of work is really like. We're covering a wide range of occupations and industries across the country and exploring some of the many changes that are happening around us today. Today, we're not just talking to one employer, but instead exploring a whole sector. Chartered Surveyors, represented by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, or the RICS, do a huge amount to shape the way in which we live. Our towns, cities, streets, homes, and ultimately our communities all rely on surveyors to keep the traffic flowing, the water running, and people moving. Surveying is far more than just one career then. There are over 100 different roles across three distinct sectors: construction, infrastructure, and land. This week, we're also going to have two different conversations. One with Blane Perrotton, Managing Director of Pride Consulting, and then a second discussion with Adelle Rhule-Martin, an apprentice with Avison Young. So firstly, let's go to Blane Perrotton, Managing Director of Pride Consulting. Hello and many thanks for joining Talent Talks.
Hi Dave, thank you very much for having me.
So I guess before we start talking about surveying too much, could we begin with you? Because I know that you were the winner of the Young Surveyor of the Year in 2019, which is quite an accolade. How did you get into surveying?
So my journey into surveying, probably not the typical route. When I was 15, 16, my father's a carpenter by trade, and I used to help him out on site. So I used to just general manual labouring and hog carrying. And I actually wanted to go into become a carpenter. But unfortunately, my dad had other ideas, and he pointed to the cool guy in the suit who used to come around the site and said, "Why don't you become a surveyor?" And at that time, I had no idea what a surveyor was. I went away, and at the time, this is giving away my age, I went to the library to read a book as opposed to going online and research what a surveyor did. And I really like the sound that it's part doctor, part detective in terms of what you do as a role. And went to university to become a surveyor, and the rest, they say, is history.
So I'm interested in the way you describe then as part doctor. So what is the role of a surveyor then?
Again, as you rightly pointed out, David, there are so many different types of surveyor. I myself am a chartered quantity surveyor, but there are surveyors such as building surveyors and project managers, so it crosses a real variety. When I say we're part doctor, part detective, for example, I will go to a site and inspect a building, and I could be looking for things that might be wrong with the building. That's where the analogy of part doctor, that we're going around surveying buildings to check that they're fit for occupation, that we can, or everyone lives in or works in a building, and we're checking that these buildings are sufficient for the purpose. And then in terms of part detective, a bit similar as well, that we are going around we're inspecting these properties, looking for any things that we as the surveyor should be flagging or making sure that they are compliant, to ensure that there's nothing going wrong with these buildings that we're working in. So I thought that sounded really, really interesting.
Yeah, I want to look at your CV and the places you've worked. I mean, you've got some interesting companies. It's not just sort of surveying organisations that you've worked for, is it?
Absolutely not, no. So I've certainly done the rounds. So I started my career with a Tier 1 main contractor. So that was physically based on sites, and a couple of... I loved that role, and a couple of notable projects that I had fortunate exposure to was the London 2012 Olympics and King's Cross Central redevelopment, which are two real iconic projects.
You used the phrase a Tier 1 main contractor. What is a Tier 1 main contractor for those of us that understand it?
A large contracting organisation, and they have... I guess in terms of Tier 1, it's just a very notable large organisation in terms of contractor, that a global institution that does lots of big projects, as opposed to a small... There's all different varieties of contracting organisations, but a Tier 1 main contractor represents an incredibly big contractor.
So these are the guys who would hold the big contracts with government and with others to do these big projects.
Yeah.
So and you went from there into a slightly different route, didn't you, I think?
Yes, so I moved from there to Deloitte's, which are a very notable, large FTSE company, and again, fantastic organisation. And from my perspective, it was moving from that contracting side into the more professional consultancy side, which I'm really thankful that I've managed to experience both. You don't necessarily have to. It was just something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to get the site exposure, and I also wanted to do the consultancy side. Again, both fantastically enjoyable, but they're very different roles in terms of what you play and what you do. And then moving into the likes of firms such as JLL, who are, again, very, very large real estate organisations, you know, top of the game in terms of what they do. And yeah, I think that, for me, there was no set career of this is what I want to do, but I knew in my mind that I wanted to experience as much as I possibly could to enable me to decide what I wanted to do. If you haven't experienced it, dare I say, you can't really comment until you've done it.
So, I mean, it sounds like you were pretty lucky that you happened to come across the idea of surveying through your family. But I guess, did you have any idea when you started out just about the breadth of opportunities that exist in the world of surveying?
Sorry, David, that cut out there, and I missed the question.
No problem. Hopefully, we'll get you back again. So, just saying, yeah, I mean, it sounds like when you started out, you were fortunate to have the family connection into the world. But did you have any kind of understanding of the huge breadth of surveying when you explored it as a career?
Absolutely not. For me, the sheer wealth of opportunities that, you know, a career as a surveyor can provide. You know, there's global opportunities to go abroad and work in the likes of Dubai and Qatar and again, but being a UK chartered surveyor really does open up a global network of opportunities you can do. The other key things that I really enjoy, and I didn't realise when going into surveying, was the ability to travel. It's not just a predominantly office-based role. You get to go to sites. You'll see a lot of these things where it's typical of electricians and plumbers that as they're driving along a road and they'll say, oh, I did that. Well, again, I've been involved in the London 2012 Olympics, and now going back to Stratford in terms of what it used to be and what it is now, I feel really proud that, you know, I have something to show for what I do. It's not just a piece of paper that gets put in the bin tomorrow. We are hugely involved in our infrastructure and the built environment around us.
So help us maybe then build that out a bit, because you're right, I mean, surveying is such a huge thing. What are the sort of the extremes of the sort of projects that you might be involved with as a surveyor, for somebody who wasn't aware of the kind of opportunities at the moment?
Again, depending on the sector that some companies may specialise in a particular area. So there could be a civil engineering firm that would be doing bridges and dams and highways. There could be, so my firm predominantly specialises in residential, hotels and things like that. So that's what I get involved in myself. But it really could be, and the projects could range from someone putting an extension onto their house, going away to building the next gherkin building or the next shard. So the variety it's unbelievable in terms of what you get exposure to and what you're able to work on. It's incredible, and every day generally is. I know it's so overused, but it really is. Every day is so different, and every project's so different.
And what do you think that are the skills that you need if you're going to be successful in the world of surveying? Is it kind of something that you need to have a kind of PhD in maths in to be able to do all of the kind of the spreadsheets?
Yes, so I will chuck the curveball in there, and I'm sure everyone's going to tell me off for this, but I'm a QS, which is predominantly seen as a construction accountant, and I always tell people off when they say that. When I was at school, I can't say that maths was top of my list in terms of subjects that I loved and I enjoyed. I think the real key skill sets for a surveyor is communication, teamwork, being personable, the amount of different people that we interact with as a surveyor. It could be a homeowner, it could be someone who owns an office building, it could be an architect, a lawyer, a structural engineer. We are constantly liaising and talking to completely different peoples from all different diverse backgrounds. So I think the key skill set of good surveyors is the ability to communicate. We have to always communicate to our clients, make sure the message is delivered, whether it be via reporting format, whether it be in a face-to-face meeting, over a telephone. So I would say the key skill set for a surveyor is communication skills and teamwork.
So if you are thinking then about getting into the world of surveying, what are the different routes that are open to people who are interested in finding out more and then entering the profession? Yeah,
so there's a number of different routes that you can utilise to become a surveyor. I would say the most typical route, and the route I followed, was going to university, so ascertaining an honours degree. Mine was also RICS Accredited, So that's really important. If you wish to become an RICS chartered surveyor, you would tend to be looking for universities that have an RICS accredited degree. So let's, for argument's sake, call that route one, which is doing the academic route, going through a graduate degree, then going into a graduate role. The alternative to that is you could do a placement with a company. So not necessarily go into university. So you can actually do it via experience. So you can go and work for a firm via summer placements. And lots of organisations will take on summer placements. You don't need to be a graduate to do this. You can be at school and do a summer placement. You can do a year placement. And lots of firms will actively do this. So you can actually go through what is called the experience route. And when I talk about the experience route, this is to chartership. So not to become a surveyor, because you can go and work for a surveying firm and you don't necessarily have to have a degree to become a surveyor. If you wish to become RICS accredited, there will be a point in time when you'll need to sit an assessment, but it will be as an experienced route candidate. And they're the two key routes that I would recommend. Also, so either going through trade and direct experience, so that'll be through placements with a firm and then possibly taking on a job from that placement, or going to university and having a graduate placement with a firm.
I know there has been some kind of growth as well in the world of apprenticeships when it comes to surveying. Is that something you've come across at all?
Yes, sorry, yeah. So the apprenticeships, which are, again, possibly a little bit of crossover with the summer placement schemes. But yeah, apprenticeships are, again, a fantastic scheme and opportunity for people to go into firms where they are supporting you as an individual and putting you through their company training in order to qualify as a chartered or a surveying professional. Cool.
So let's go back to you a bit, because I know that after having worked in all those different big organisations, you kind of took the plunge and set up your own business as well, which is an adventure in its own right.
Absolutely. It wasn't something I would say that when I set out into the profession, it was something that I had always strived to do and was, that was my sole driver. It absolutely was not. I went into the profession not having any kind of end goal, as it were. It was, for me, it was see the opportunities and take it. Yes, I took the plunge, possibly in one of the worst times you could arguably say to set up a firm in the midst of COVID. However, that being said, back to my original point of the key skill sets of a surveyor, I think, are communication, relationships, things like that. The business is doing fantastically well. I've thoroughly enjoyed all the headaches and the dramas that come with it, and wouldn't change it for the world.
So surveying, by the sounds of it, not only gives you a chance to join large organisations, but also if you are a bit entrepreneurial, then there's plenty of scope to do your own thing as well.
Absolutely, and I do think that is something that surveying does broadly offer, and it's not just entrepreneur in the sense.
So let's think then again back to the wider world of surveying. And I think one of the things that we're obviously aware of, and we know that young people are particularly interested in when it comes to career choices, is thinking about the way in which the world is changing. So things like sustainability, or if you like, the green agenda. My kind of outside impression is that surveying has got to play a really important role in helping us solve some of those issues. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. As we intimated at the start, David, the role of surveyor, we're influencing everything around us. We're influencing the world, dare I say, that we live in and we occupy. So this boils down to a new house that might be built. Are we using solar panel? Are we using energy efficient materials? Or to the next Olympic stadium that's going to be built, how energy efficient is that going to be? So I think the green agenda and our role as a surveyor goes back to, we're always considering new technologies and new enhancements that we can do to services. Use of technology has become so important into not just surveying, but I would say generically in business. Technology has now become so important. Even back to, and again, possibly I appreciate I look about 2 years old, but generally showing my age a bit here, the use of mail and posting that's our form of communication. Now, green initiatives are not to send anything via post if it can be helped, and generally using email or different forms of communication to reduce that type of footprint. And I think every role, not just every organisation and industry, has a huge role to play in that, and not just surveyors. But generically with the surveying profession, we are looking at how things are being built and their use as well. It's not just let's build this. It's actually how can we utilise the building better? Can we have better energy uses of the building, better services connections? So all things like this, and that's where it's so interesting, the role. And I can honestly say, having been in the industry for over 15, 16 years, there's always new changes, there's always new technologies, new enhancements. So it really is, you never get to a point as a surveyor, I'd say, where you can say, I know everything, because it's impossible. There are always new enhancements, always new building regulations that we have to conform to. And I think that's what keeps it incredibly exciting.
So give us a bit of an insight then as to what, for example, the rest of your day holds today then as a surveyor. Having talked to us, what will you go on to do?
So I've got a valuation this afternoon. So I'm following this call. I will change from my attire because this is not a site-specific attire, which I'll
put me to shame, I have to say.
Which I'll need my PPE in. So I'll get to my car. I'll drive to a site, take my phone, my notepad, and go around and inspect the site itself. Take photographs.
What sort of site is it today, basically?
So it's a residential development. It's in Kent, so I live in Kent myself. So it's actually not too far, which isn't too bad. And I'll go around and inspect all the different units, take photographs, and then have a meeting following the site call with the developer, and we'll talk through the valuation to ensure that they're not being silly and claiming too much money. And then following that meeting, I'll then go back to my office, produce my report, so put the photos in, update, talk about the progress, talk about what they're building on site, whether they're conforming to planning, X, Y, Z, all the different things that we need to talk about, and then issue the report to my client, and then hopefully get a nice call from them to say thank you for this fantastic report, Blaine.
So you started out with your business a year ago, nicely timed for the beginning of the pandemic, but you've already managed to grow it quite quickly then. I think you would say you've hired, another 4 or 5 people already?
Yeah, and that's purely down to, wasn't expected, from being honest, in terms of my business plan. It was slightly ahead of where I wanted to take the business, but that's purely down to client demand. And what I think has happened actually with COVID is probably given a number of clients the opportunity to assess the professionals that they use and whether some possibly are not performing. And it's given a huge opportunity and time for them to really review that and do a full due diligence process on the consultants and the professionals they use, which, dare I say, has probably played in my favour slightly.
Well, you've got to take it where you can find it, haven't you? And all of your team then located close to you, or are you around the country now?
No, we are UK wide. So we've got surveyors in Bristol, in Birmingham, in Essex, in London, in Norfolk, in Manchester. So yeah, we really are all over, and that's again the role of a surveyor. It really is. You can be on the go. There's huge opportunities to travel, and yeah, so we're UK spread.
Brilliant. So last question then. If you had to pick one project out that you've worked on the last 15 years as being like the most interesting of all, which one would you pick and why?
So for me, in terms of iconic, I love my sport, so it has to be the 2012 Olympics. It's just, for me, it was an incredible project to be part of, and the thing I was really proud to see is, I know people were very nervous when we won the Land 2012 and what's going to happen to the tube, but actually, in my opinion, it was run fantastically well and it was incredible. And for me, having the ability to have been involved in that, and yes, my remit was very, very minuscule, but it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, I was part of that project. And when I walked around, and I think I got tickets to the netball, that was, and when I walked around the stadium, I was really proud to have been able to say I was part of this project. So that was.
So when we're back down at Stratford looking at it, then which building should we be looking at and saying Blaine was involved with that one?
So I was the main stadium.
The main stadium. Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go. That's a pretty iconic building to put your name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Blaine, thank you so much for sharing some time today and talking to us a bit about the world of surveying. It's been really interesting to talk to you, and congratulations on the new business, and I hope it continues to go as well as it has done so far.
No, thank you very much, David, and thank you for having me, and I wish everyone well in the current situation.
That's great, Blaine. Thanks again. So, moving on, let's meet Adelle. Now, Adelle is an apprentice with global firm Avison Young. And Avison Young are an organisation with offices across the US, Germany, Ireland, Mexico, Poland, and of course the UK. And joining us from Birmingham is Adelle. So Adelle, welcome to Talent Talks.
Thank you.
So tell us a bit about you. How did you get into this world of surveying?
Well, it's a little bit of a funny story. I first wanted to be an accountant and was adamant that I was going to be an accountant until I started doing a placement at college. I worked with this academy and I got introduced to Avison Young to have a 2 weeks work experience placement there. Carried out work experience there. It's a property firm undertaking commercial properties with surveying, building surveying, commercial surveying, valuation and all sorts. So I did some work experience in the various teams, absolutely loved it. Found out that this was going to be my dream career, no longer wanted to be an accountant anymore, and so I just had a total shift. And then I've just kind of really focused on becoming a surveyor, because at the moment I am currently on an apprenticeship. Still got a year left, so that was my journey through that work experience process.
So we'll come back to the apprenticeship in a bit, but what was it then that appealed to you about surveying? Because it's a huge career, isn't it? There's so many different strands to it.
What appealed to me was that no day was the same. Every day is different, and the variety and diversity of work that you actually get is great. So let's say, for instance, one day I was managing a property and I found out that there was a kitten trapped inside, and so my job for that day was to go to the property, call the RSPCA, get them in and save this kitten. And honestly, it was one of the highlights of my career. One of the things considered small, but I consider great. So yeah, no day is the same. Honestly, you could come across anything.
I guess that wasn't a typical day. So what is a typical day in your life then when it comes to being a surveyor?
Yeah, so a typical day. So at the moment, I'm working within property management. I have worked in other departments previously. It involves managing properties. So we manage the property on behalf of an occupier. So basically a business that occupies multiple buildings. We manage all the property aspects, so then they do not have to. So any problems that they have concerning their property, whether it's a roof leak, whether it's rats infestation, whether somebody is parking on their land, whether somebody is living in their property and they shouldn't be living in the property. I deal with all sorts of things. So any problem that you could think of that is property related, that's what I deal with, which is why there are different things that come in every day, because whatever problem you can have, I deal with.
So although surveying is quite a technical career, it sounds like an awful lot of what you do is liaising with other people and talking to them.
Yes, definitely. Within property management, I'd say the more technical side is documenting things like licenses. So say, for instance, if my client or a neighbour wants to have the right to walk over a piece of land or to use a piece of land or access somewhere, then I can also, alongside with the solicitors, document that, or looking at the health and safety of a building as well, making sure that the staff that work for our client are also safe. That's when it becomes more technical in that aspect. Those kind of jobs are more repetitive and kind of like the standard practice. And so when they come in, it's kind of like in the door, out the door, and also managing exits as well when people want to come out of the building, or when people want to buy new buildings. So it's just managing all that legal aspect of it as well.
And is that something you've done as part of your apprenticeship then, the legal elements as well as the project management?
Yes. So as part of the assessment of competency, at the end of the apprenticeship, we have to show that we've actually been doing this work, and we can't just pretend and fake it or just say that we know about it. We have to say, no, I've actually done this. This is my evidence. So it is very practical, and that's what I love. It's not your traditional apprenticeship where you think, oh, they're going to be there just making their teas and coffees. No, it is hands-on.
I know that there are quite a few people obviously gone into surveying through the university route. What was it then that appealed to you about an apprenticeship as a way of starting your career?
Personally, for me, my sister had just finished university, and so had my brother. And if I'm honest, it wasn't financially sensible to put me through to university. I'm from a single parent family, and I know my mum would have done everything that she could and would have made it work for me to go to university, but I decided I didn't want to put that strain and stress on my mum. She's done a lot for me, and I decided that I'm actually going to find a way to actually get my degree funded. During my 2 weeks work experience at Avison Young, I spoke to one of the senior regional directors and I said, I'd love to continue to work for your company. Please can I be provided with the opportunity to work for your company and study at the same time? And that's actually how the apprenticeship program was implemented within the company, because before it didn't exist. And so then from there on, we've established a apprenticeship scheme in both Birmingham and London, and we look to continue to grow that.
So the apprenticeship you're doing is a degree apprenticeship then? It leads to a degree as well?
Yes, that's correct, at Birmingham City University.
So that really is the best of both worlds then. You're going to end up with a degree as if you've gone to university, but you'll have been earning money the whole way through.
Yes. That's the beauty of it.
So, I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? There are quite a few examples of degree apprenticeships, but do you feel that you've lost out at all by not going through that traditional university route?
Personally, no. I've always been quite career driven, and I've always wanted to kind of be successful within my academics as well. I don't personally feel like I've lost out. Within property, it's very social anyway. There's always a social event to go to. Obviously, with lockdown, there's been a lack of that. In fact, none of that. But in the normal world, we do have a lot of events where we do meet people. We have something called the RICS Matrix, which is actually focused on newly qualified surveyors. So they tend to be younger. Obviously, it is for all newly qualified surveyors post 5 years. However, it just traditionally tends to be the young crowd because of how people enter into the industry. And so I'll go to a lot of their events, but also I'll go to other kind of social quizzes. We are a social bunch because we believe it's not just about what you know, but it's about who you know in order to get work going forward.
And I mean, talk about career. So where do you think this takes you then in terms of your career? You've obviously been successful so far in getting into the degree apprenticeship, but there's such a breadth of opportunities out there. Where will you be, do you think, in 5-10 years' time?
I definitely want to be a director within the company, because I believe when you're positioned, when you're put into a position of power, you're able to make more decisions and you can have more autonomy over what you do. I want to specialise in development, so working on developing communities, because I believe that there's a lot of segregation at the moment with the current way that communities operate, and I believe that there should be a more kind of diverse structure in the way that it's done to kind of reduce crime rate, and not to have places that are hidden, but to actually create communities, a community feel. So that's what I'm really passionate about, developing and creating communities, kind of breaking down like the traditional ghettos, and actually creating an environment that people want to live in and enjoy living in. Because when you enjoy living in a place, I believe you start to respect it more.
I think that's a really important point you make. I mean, surveyors are responsible, aren't they, for almost shaping the communities of the future. So what sort of employer will you need to work for to be able to really kind of bring that dream to life, do you think? Is that with your current employer, or is there other places you need to go work?
Yeah, so I believe that with my current employer I would be able to do this. Prior to my work experience in property management, I was working with the development department, and that is where we get involved with a lot of councils, so Birmingham City Council, Wolverhampton Council, Coventry City Council. There's multiple councils that we deal with as clients. We work with planners as well to actually shape communities and have that conversation in terms of what is the market currently doing. So we educate them on what the market is currently doing, what we think is best for this piece of land to do. We also listen to people that give bids for new neighbourhoods. So people come to us and say, okay, this is what we want to do with this piece of land, and we kind of decide and advise if it's a viable project. And so, yes, we are very involved with that aspect of shaping the community.
Fantastic. So thinking about other young people who are considering career options at the moment, what would you say to them are probably the most attractive parts of being a surveyor?
I'd definitely say the social aspect.
I got that bit, yeah.
Definitely. It helps if you are an outgoing person. Not saying if you're not an outgoing person, that probably wouldn't be for you. But I'm just saying it is important that you are open to making new connections and meeting people. Being friendly will actually help you. So if you like to talk to people and develop new relationships, it will actually help you, because people, when it comes to work, they will think of you first and know that you are approachable. I'd also say the earning opportunities, the earning potential as well within the industry. I'd say even though I'm an apprentice, I'd say that it is higher paid than other apprenticeships. So when you look at the statistics across the board, you have to do your research to make sure you're getting paid the right amount. So yeah, and obviously being able to develop your career as well, you are able to kind of navigate that as well. And with my company, they've been kind of very open. We're quite very open about having those conversations of where I want my career to go. And I think it's more about, it's not just about the career that you go into, but it's about the employer that you work for, making sure that they are able to have those conversations with you, that they're happy to build you up as an individual.
And you mentioned work experience earlier on. I mean, that sounds like it was a fairly crucial part of your journey, because you managed to persuade your employer to then move on to an apprenticeship. How could young people find out more about surveying if they're interested in kind of going down this apprenticeship route?
Yeah, so what I've found is that a lot of people do not know about surveying. When I was growing up, I never knew anything about it. Yes, I saw buildings going up, but I didn't know the story behind them. So I think if somebody's watching this now and they are considering their career paths, then I would seriously advise them to consider surveying, because I've thoroughly enjoyed it. That's why we're trying to go out to more schools and universities to educate people about that career opportunity. I'd say going to the government website, there should be, companies aren't very good at doing it, but there should be careers advertised on the website with apprenticeships, because they actually get money from the government to support the apprenticeship program. It's called the Apprenticeship Levy. So it's no cost to the business in terms of paying for your education. So it should be there, but also just look on company websites, companies that you want to work for, and see if they offer apprenticeships, or just calling people up, because sometimes it won't be advertised. So like in my situation, apprenticeships within the company didn't exist. So you've just got to sometimes just take a whim and just ask. And see if that opportunity can be made available, but also in your early days, before you even step into your career, make those connections as soon as possible.
Yes, that's the Find an Apprenticeship website, and also probably worthwhile mentioning the RICS website as well. I think there's quite a few resources there for people to look at.
Definitely. So with the RICS website, you'll see a lot of people's journeys throughout the apprenticeship. It will also guide you to the government website as well to find career opportunities, because the careers themselves are not advertised on the website, but it will give you an insight to what surveying is like within the industry, real life stories and testimonies, talking about people's progression within their careers, and it will also show you step by step how you can actually progress in your career.
That's fantastic. Well, Adelle, thanks so much indeed for joining us on Talent Talks. It's been great to hear that completely different perspective from that of Blaine we heard earlier on. And finally, thank you to everybody else for joining this Talent Talks. Next time, we'll be exploring the world of transport, and more specifically, transport for London. So from buses to the underground and rivers to bikes, we'll find out just what is needed to keep one of the world's greatest cities moving. I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much indeed.